So, welcome, folks, once again to another episode of the Astrology of Family Karma and Relationships podcast. I'm Alexander Mallon, your host, and today we have a guest astrologer with a really interesting topic. So, let me introduce, astrologer and intuitive and tarot practitioner Rob Meisner. So, Rob, tell us a little bit about yourself, and maybe you can kind of kick off this question you had when we were talking about this topic of birthing. Our topic is astrology and birthing and labor and delivery, and we'll kick into that in a moment.
Hi. Yeah, Rob Meister, my mother got me into astrology and tarot many, many years ago. It's been a while since you've been my teacher, and thank you for all the insights that you've given me.
That's kind.
Very, 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 very insightful and helped me a lot throughout my years.
Oh, how sweet of you. Thank you.
Obviously, one of the things that really affects you as a person, anybody, especially women, but
Mm.
men too. And you don't even think about men as well. Is
We
having a
we
kid.
oftentimes don't when it comes to kids, right?
you know, but men do get affected by having kids as well. Very, very important. It is, like you said, birth chart isn't just your birth chart, it's also an event chart for your parents. When I uh, knew that I was going to have my second child, well, my first child as well, but especially my second child, the second time, first child was kind of an emergency C-section. So it was like,
Oh.
like a normal birth or whatever. Second child, the doctor actually said, "Hey, you know, you have you have a range of dates. We have this date for you that you can have the C-section, but you can change it if you want." So obviously that got me thinking, hey, um, looking into potential charts, saying, hey, the date that she gave us was has, Sun Moon Square. Wow, we can actually change that if we want. First time, like I never would have imagined or ever heard in history that, hey, somebody can choose a birth date and time for their child.
You're not the
That puts
first,
your
but
conscious, yeah, into obviously that puts you into play. But it also, for me, when I thought of that, it was like, yes, that's kind of something heavy as well. So you have to be very, very responsible. Takes a lot of introspection.
well, you just said something key. I'm sorry, I interrupted you for a moment. You were saying it brings up the issue of consciousness or conscious awareness, I think is, but I mean, is that what you're?
Yeah. So obviously, when you pick the birth chart for somebody, or anything, and you that's so can have such a heavy effect on somebody, not necessarily dire. I felt the weight of responsibility on my shoulders to make sure that, hey, you know, if I have this opportunity, I get this right. So I kept coming around to, hey, I can pick this date. I was looking at the Thursday or the Friday, especially the Friday, that she would have had an Aries moon. But at the end of the day, I didn't know what the effect of conscious change would be, so I just reverted back to the original date that they gave us.
Hmm.
And
Well, let's
mom was
pause for
okay with that as well. So,
let's pause for a second and just kind of bring up our PowerPoint. We have a few slides. After all, visual aids can be helpful, I think, in astrology, and we have some charts to look at as well. So, of course, I mean, I kind of loosely have titled this program "The Astrology of Birthing and Delivery." The subtitle,
mhm.
"My doctor offered various dates to have our C-section birth." And so, again, our guest Rob Meisner. Um, that is, I think, a working title. I mean, I am a Capricorn after all, and this is the functional fact of what we're getting at here. And we don't have necessarily answers, folks, but we have questions and some ideas. So, it kind of hits me that, every parent dreams of parenthood. And as you say, when you are certainly a fellow student of astrology, it takes on different dimensions about this being, this soul, and who they might be and what their potential is. So, in the 21st century now, as you pointed out, Rob, when our obstetrician offers us different dates of when to have this baby, when to birth this being, not only are we considering the general health of mom, certainly, and baby, But then there's the subtext, for the student of astrology. Gee, what does each chart possibility? I mean, if you've got 3 or 4 days options of when you might have a C-section, what does the chart describe about that being or about that experience? Or, who will this baby be? Who are they? What will they? How will they be experienced by the world? After all, chart does describe that. So this idea of as above, so below, the old axiom, as above, so below, becomes a really critical idea, right?
Yes, among others.
Among other things. So it's on your mind, like as above, so below. Where you mentioned
Um,
earlier, my consciousness. Where's my headset?
yeah. Well, another thing that, shamans tend to point out is energy flows where attention goes.
Right on.
Obviously, where you put your energy and where you look into, in this particular case, where you pour over energy, you give all your attention to it, or not all of it, but a lot of it. So obviously, as parents, you want the best for your child, you want the best outcome. But then you also have to consider ramifications of what, any decision, maybe unintended consequences would be. Um,
Yeah, well, so
that
that's
in
why.
this particular case put me off. So,
Well, that's why I came up with a couple of other slides here. We have this ideal, right? Where we have these joyful ideas about, and certainly most moms, especially carrying this soul in their body, have these joyful ideas of where it might, how who this person, this soul will be. Of course, that can go sometimes wonderfully right and sometimes not so perfectly, as the Gary Larson slide here says. The Midvale School for the Gifted, but he doesn't figure out the doorway here. Not too rare for gifted who can be a little out of their bodies. You never know what's going to happen. So we're so here we go. We're going to sort of start the engines here of the general query of this topic, these charts. What are we talking about here? And one of the things I always teach every client that I have is something fundamental that we're considering when we talk about astrological charts is that we're looking at winter, spring, summer, fall. I mean, you're talking about what is your season of birth? What is your season sign? And I think that season sign theme is a really important concept. I think this idea is not just your birth date or your astrological sign. Your just
yeah,
astrological sign is really a shorthand for understanding the turn of the seasons. An astrological sign is a calendrical shorthand for a day, month, and year, but or a day and a month certainly. So each sign's a kind of shorthand for that phase. And again, Western astrology certainly, particularly, is constructed above the equator. This idea of the seasonal phenomenon above the equator. Um, what happens from springtime to summer to fall to winter, which really discusses, in terms of the seasons, let's say spring to summer to fall to winter, the arc of the sun. The sun, raising
yeah,
every noon hour higher and higher in the sky until summer solstice, and then descending into the fall to the lowest point during winter solstice, December 21st. So that arc of the sun, the arc of daylight, and for humans, like daytime, daylight is good. We're diurnal, we're not nocturnal. So daytime experience and long days, short nights for the spring summer, or longer nights and shorter days for the winter months, are what astrology charts talk about, really. The sun sign, the season sign describes that. So when you're having a birth, in this case a C-section, you know when your child's going to be born within a few days, right? I mean, you knew this was a December birth, huh? And so, without necessarily probably thinking about it, because you have a lot on your mind when you have a baby, it's 3 trimesters in and you're getting ready to deliver. Obviously, you knew you had a Sag baby, right?
yes,
And all that implied.
yeah. Well, I found interesting though too about the chart that we ended up settling on is that she's got a sun in Sag, but it's pretty much by itself, and you know,
Well, we'll bring the chart up and we can
there's
dig into that chart. But so the fact that the sun is by itself in the chart, you're saying was significant.
yeah, but also that she does have the Capricorn stellium right there, and she was born right when COVID was starting to come out. So,
Wow.
um,
Well, that's power packed timing.
yes.
Well, let's go back to our
But her
cheat sheet
personal
here.
planets, if you look at it, were actually not very close to the sun. Mars and Scorpio, Venus, even Jupiter, I think, at the first degree of Capricorn
Well, we'll dig.
as
We'll
well.
bring up our chart here really quick and come back to it. A few other slides to dig into. But so here's that slide of her sun being overhead. She came at December 3rd of 2019 at 11:03 in the morning in Poughkeepsie, New York. It's basically just north of New York City, for those people who don't know, the Hudson Valley area. So since she's born at 11 o'clock in the morning, just past 11:03, that sun is arcing. And it rose in the morning is arcing toward that midday point overhead, its highest point. So she's born just before the sun is at its highest
Yeah.
elevation for that day. So there are a
I
couple
had a
of,
question.
well, yeah,
What's
sorry,
your
go ahead.
take on? I know a lot of people are having C-sections and scheduled C-sections. To your point earlier, people are born during the mornings usually. So this is a pretty typical time, and more people are being born during the morning. We're seeing probably less and less people born at night.
Well, we in prepping the show for our listeners and our viewers, Rob and I were kicking around this idea of looking at the different dates that your obstetrician provided, the possibilities of when this C-section, this birth can happen, and I had thrown out the idea let's kind of keep that 11 o'clock roughly that morning time for a potential for all these dates we're going to look at in a moment, because I would think most obstetricians, most labor and delivery doctors, excuse me, and staff probably feel that the morning is a better time for a procedure because you never know for sure what happens in a medical procedure. Um, I've had over the decades clients uh, who are electing surgical dates or electing, um, some kind of medical procedure date. Doctors typically suggesting morning time, just in case anything were to happen in any given procedure. So yeah, I think we have to presuppose that probably more obstetricians will be delivering children by C-section somewhere in the morning hours than, let's say, late afternoon or evening hours, right? I mean, it's less
Mhm.
likely, and depending upon the weather, I guess if it's a wintertime birth, as yours was, in a wintertime zone, probably less likely to deliver a child by C-section in the afternoon or the evening hours when you could have inclement weather issues, um, both entering, getting to the delivery room, or maybe I guess
Yeah.
exiting too.
Funny you mentioned that because that night, as I was coming back from work the night before, there was a bad snowstorm. I got a flat tire, and it was a struggle to get to the hospital in time,
Get
but we
out.
made it.
Well, so Emmy's chart should show that because
Yeah.
charts describe circumstances. So that was the night before Emmy's birth when
Right.
when Natalia was getting close. It was like time.
Yeah.
hmm Okay, let's go back to our cheat sheets here for a moment, our visuals. So one thing to keep in mind, of course, always with astrology is that what we're looking at is a season sign, and a sub-season sign. So that's another factor. If you had a couple of days to choose from for a C-section, I mean, it is possible that a child could be born, talk about cuspy, between one sign and another, between, let's say, Scorpio and Sag, or Sag and Capricorn or something for this wintertime birth. It is
Yeah.
possible that a child might be, one sun sign or another. And that brings up a whole other thing where a lot of astrologers, I think, Rob, would say that, let's say in this case for Emmy, she's in December, that a Scorpio and a Sag are two really radically different people. That so if she was to be born maybe on that cusp within a day or two, that would be another consideration of whether I have a Scorpio child or a Sag child. And the way I look at it, since my background, uh, my other passion, most people know, is that I'm a very avid backyard astronomer. From an observational standpoint, it doesn't really matter a whole hell of a lot those few days, those few degrees. The seasonal change happens over time, happens over weeks. It doesn't really, I mean, there is a truth of from day to day, like I found March 21st, right around the beginning of Aries, the end of Pisces, that turn of that season, when in celestial mechanics, the sun begins to climb over that celestial equator and we begin to have longer days. There is a definite significant shift in nature from the cold and the dark and the difficulty of winter to the beginning of springtime when Aries starts. So it is true each cusp of each sign does have this natural shift period, which also means um, people tend to respond to the environment. We tend to gear up for blizzard time, or we tend to gear up for beach going time. There are two different things. So
Hmm.
within a couple of days, it can, of course, make a difference what the flow of nature is and the flow of social consciousness is. But at the same time, you're kind of within a 2 or 3 or 4 day period delivering a child by C-section. And so whatever's happening, kind of the outer world that's imprinting mom and dad and the baby, that the chart is mirroring. It's going to be within sort of that cusp. So I look at people born on the cusp as kind of both signs. That's what I look at. But in this case, it doesn't apply to Emmy's birth, of course. But I just thought it deserves being said that that season of birth is part of what a chart is, and of course that time of birth is really critical. I love this graphic. Where are we in the sun's journey from midnight to rising to noon hour culminating to sunset, and what do we collectively typically do? Those are the houses of a chart. So if we had a time variation from one potential C-section date to another, we would be going from perhaps one sign or another on the ascendant, which every astrologer knows would be a significant difference. So when we bring up Emmy's chart, we'll see that for sure. Another issue is the moon phase and the moon placement and the moon degree. Here, over a 3 or 4 day span of potential C-section birth, this was, as we see in those charts when we bring them up, a really big issue for you, right? Because you could have had for Emmy, you could have had a moon in Aquarius or a moon in Pisces or a moon in Aries. Is that right?
Um, yes. Usually, I mean, I don't know if we could have gotten the earlier date, but the later the Aries moon was probably more on the table.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. So the moon
The
sun
Friday.
phase, the moon sun phase could even be an issue from over a 4 day period as that phase changes. But again, I look at nature astronomically when I'm out there at the eyepiece in my observatory. I mean, I really look at
Mm,
it as having subtle variations over a 2 or 3 day period. But if you had a birth option, over a 4 or 5 day period, which kind of you did for Emmy, it could be a different phase. And each moon phase we know has a different astrological sort of meaning, right?
yes. Well, yeah, to your point, I mean, I kind of got the feeling, yeah, no, she's definitely going to be a Sag no matter what. Um, but there's a like the subtle. I got a little worried about the subtle um, distinctions between what this moon phase and that moon phase. I don't think Jupiter would have changed. I don't think Jupiter would have been in the previous sign had I been there for a few days, but it was Jupiter's really close to um, beginning of Capricorn there.
I think
Um,
we'll see that on December 2nd, yeah, that Jupiter actually did ingress into Capricorn on Emmy's birth date. So technically, an astrologer perhaps would see that Jupiter would be in its own home sign of Sag the day before Emmy's birth, and in the sign Jupiter in the sign of its fall in Capricorn, the day of Emmy's birth. So, technically speaking, one could look at that. And astrologers, I think, are taken to look at things very definitively. There is electional astrology, electing a time to have a surgery, or electing a time to open a store for business, or electing a time to launch a stock in terms of stock market astrology. And those kinds of subtleties are things astrologers really, really look at, and they hold them often, I think, uh, in a very black and white kind of a way. I don't know if you experience
Yeah.
that, right? They kind of think either the Sag is in its home base sign of, I mean, Jupiter in the home base sign of Sag, or it's in the sign of its fall Capricorn on Emmy's birth. Astrologers might seize on that, right?
Yeah, that's true. And but to your point also, it's not really it's really a very, very seldom do you say like, on this particular date at this particular time at the moment that it changes signs, you know, is it very like a switch? It usually is very much a gradual like the leaves coming out of the trees.
That's a great analogy. I love that. The leaves don't usually just pop right out from a bare twig. It's a process. That's the point of, all charts are astronomically a process. The sun rising and setting every day, it's a process. The season, it's a process, right? The other thought too that's connected for me when I'm thinking about Emmy's your daughter's birth and other people who are uh, having this option as well of when to deliver their C-section baby. The other thing is, what zodiac do you use? Because if we use the Vedic zodiac, which is a different zodiac, all these ideas of planets that are right in the cusp or the edge, as Jupiter in your case, that goes out the window. There's a different way of measuring the circle of the seasons. But I'm a tropical Western astrologer, as you are. We're both tropical Western astrologers, unless I know there's something happening for you I don't know yet. But we use that starting point of 0 Aries, March 21st, as the beginning of the growing season, the phenomenal season. And I think it does really actually match our social seasonal
Yeah.
programming, you know, in a big way. So take it away here. I'm going to bring up Emmy's birth chart. Here it is, December 3rd, 2019, 11:03 in the morning in Poughkeepsie, New York. That's again Hudson Valley, New York, north of Manhattan. So, what were the things that you were looking at with this chart?
Mostly the first thing that sprung to my mind was the sun and Sag square the moon in Pisces there. I knew given just a few days difference, that would have been probably the biggest thing. Um, and that was the one thing that really hit me the hardest. Oh, she's gonna have a sun moon square if she
Yeah,
continues to be born on that day. Um,
right on the day before the second, when that
yeah,
Jupiter was still in Sag, barely, the moon
yeah,
was in Aquarius. So an air
yes,
air moon and a fire sun, and technically speaking, not in square to each other. The day before her
uh,
birth, the day of Emmy's birth, there was that moon moving towards square. It was in an applying square, right? It was at 4 degrees.
7 degrees away from a square.
Right, 7 degrees away,
Yeah,
but that sun was 11
yeah,
degrees
applying square.
applying square. That moon is active, and so the idea too of a waxing moon versus waning, this building toward energy versus perhaps a waning of energy. Applying aspects are often astrologically seen as somehow more powerful, and so separating aspects implied to be somehow shifting, which kind of think about just nature again. You're moving towards something, or shifting, moving away from an encounter. That's really what we're talking about.
Hmm.
So you saw this, the moon, the day before Emmy's birth was 22 of Aquarius at 11 o'clock in the morning on December 2nd of
Yeah,
2019. And, therefore, in good alignment by element, air element for that moon in Aquarius, fire for that sun. And the day after, the day of Emmy's birth, actually, that moon in a water sign, that sun in a fire sign. So I would kind of wonder, proof in the pudding. I wouldn't wonder. I would presume, most astrologers would presume, that her sun in a fire sign, Sag, lighting the hearth, lighting the candle, a wintertime celebration of light, lighting the menorah. December when Emmy was born. Lighting the hearth is I think, a great fire version of wintertime Sag. So that
Hmm.
fire of spirit with her ego, her conscious sun, and that water sign moon would suggest that she's, it's like, fire and water, steam. I mean, do you experience? I wonder your experience of having your daughter. Does that quality of steaminess sort of come out?
Yes, I would definitely say so. She's a very bubbly person, very gregarious, loves to smile. She does cry once in a while, and it can be pretty intense um, when she does have, an emotional breakdown, but she comes through it. And just like all um, fire signs, fire energy, yeah, you get upset very quickly, but then you're over it very quickly as well.
I,
Um,
I
so,
wonder. I wonder, since you had the option of the day before Emmy's birth, the 2nd of December 2019, and that Aquarius moon, that late 22-degree Aquarius moon, versus the Emmy's birth, that 4 degrees Pisces moon that Emmy has on her birth date. Um, I wonder if you were looking at that elemental balance of the air moon and the fact that that moon, I call it moon in Aquarius. I call moon in Aquarius or Capricorn moon in a wintertime sign. I think that that's a
yeah.
very important way, naturalistically, nature wise, to see it. Moon in a wintertime sign. And it definitely has a different vibe than moon in that early springtime, that just pre spring time of Pisces, where the winter's starting to break. Moon in water sign Pisces would imply a different emotional nature. So I'm going to guess that you saw the fiery Sag sun that she'd have in that early December date. But that moon in Aquarius would be a different emotional character. So tell me about that. That must have crossed your mind, right?
Yeah, it did. I thought, yeah, that would be great. I also looked at the later chart when she would have had the moon in Aries and thought that would have been, the sun moon trine, like really, really heavy into fire. Um,
That's
and
that's
sometimes it's hard
that's this chart
to
here.
say, but
Whoops, there it
yes,
is. The December 5th chart has a moon almost in
six.
Aries, and the December 6th chart, the moon is in Aries. So that's you're referring to that moon in Aries being fire and the
Yes,
sun in Sag being fire.
yep. Um, my son has a sun moon trine. It's all air, Aquarius, Gemini. And I got along with him, obviously pretty well. Energy flows very well. And I was sort of thinking, maybe something like this would be great to give to my daughter if it's possible. And I don't know why, and I don't know where it is, but something didn't feel quite right. And at the end of the day, I felt the best option would be just to go with the original date that they gave us. And
So
sometimes it's hard to say why, but in this particular case, I know that sun moon, and I told myself, yeah, if you have a sun moon square, yeah, it might be difficult, but at least it gets the personality moving.
Well,
So,
so that is something that did cross my mind here with Emmy's chart when I first looked at it too, was that moon was applying to Neptune, just coming out of Aquarius, by the way. So the
yeah.
way I practice astrology is I see that moon as being cuspy. I see that moon as being
Hmm.
certainly Neptunianly Pisces, next to conjoin Neptune here, that moon is Piscean and Neptunian, but that moon is also just coming out of Aquarius. And also, for the record, one of the four royal stars is Fomalhaut. That is at 3 degrees of Pisces. And so her moon is conjoined by 1 degree Fomalhaut, which is one of those royal stars of Egypt. It talks about fame or infamy, but usually fame or possibilities of grandness or greatness. And here, of course, the moon we sort of emotional, which is sort of imply that when she's emotionally in flow, there's something maybe special about her that she can bring or bring to relational connections. But that moon is also still just coming out of 4 degrees, so it means 8 hours or 9 hours earlier, the moon had been exiting Aquarius. So with this Aquarius rising, that an 11 o'clock or mid morning birth would have, that moon does have an Aquarian flavor to it. There is going to be a dispassionate quality of her one would think her emotional wiring. Of course, again, if she were on December 2nd with that moon actually in Aquarius, that would even be more likely for her to be very logical, rational, dispassionate. Moon and air sign, sun
Yeah.
and fire sign, so internally a flow. But then I looked at that Aquarius rising with Saturn and Pluto, and I thought, Moon ruled by Saturn with the Saturn rulership rising. This is going to be a rather logical, emotionally logical person. And there were maybe emotionally Moon in Aquarius, Moon in a wintertime sign is how I teach it. Maybe emotionally kind of not necessarily flowing, you know. So I wonder if that crossed your mind about the day before Emmy her birth.
Yeah, that did as well. Obviously, in these few days, it's the moon that's going to be the biggest difference in the span of about 5 days. So usually, when I look at this and you look at whatever options you have, and it's strange that we're speaking of it like this, but when you do look at the options that you um, you have to look at the consequences of what would be if you chose a moon in Aquarius. Um, and I kind of had a feeling my son has a moon in Gemini, and I don't know if I could have another air sign moon in the house.
I see.
Uh, just because he, he is, he's a chatter, and he's a real jokester, can be. Um, but having a moon in Pisces, yes, I trying to you know reconcile, hey, that's a sun moon square, and yes, maybe it might bring difficulties to her life. I did not know at the time about the royal star that was there at 3 degrees. I know completely forgot about. I know I'm aware of obviously Regulus and um but that was the one that um I know it might give her a little bit of difficulty, but it might also give her the impetus to um get a personality and move in life. So
Well, here's another little tidbit. That December 2nd, so again, just for the record, listeners and viewers, your daughter is born indeed on December 3rd. The C section was December 3rd, 2019, at 11:03 in the morning in New York, Poughkeepsie, New York.
yeah.
On December 2nd, and really the day before that, December 1st, that sun would have been at 9 degrees
The
of,
Galactic Center.
well, no, that's actually Antares. That's Antares. That's the fixed star
Oh yeah.
Antares, another of the four royal stars of Egypt.
Oh
And
yeah.
so that 9 degree Sag sun, it's really close here by 2 degrees, her birth chart actually. 9 degrees of Sag is Antares, the heart of the scorpion. It is a
Mm,
military kind of an energy. It is a power compelling kind of energy. It is a quality of being stronger and larger than life. There can be a quality of seductive. There can be a quality of uh, dominating. There can be a quality of control. There certainly is a standout personality. So she's got her, on her birth date, actually, December 3rd, she has that sun 2 degrees away from Antares. Most astrologers say, oh, it's got to be within 1 degree. And I say fooey to
mhm.
that. I think that's based on what? See, astrology in general is an interpretive art form anyway. And so there's no real rule book on it exactly. Will Emmy's character have that Antares 9 degrees Sag somehow embedded in her character structure? I say definitely yes. So her sons can join Antares, one of the four royal stars of Egypt, turning point stars of the seasons, and her moon is conjoined Fomalhaut, two of the royal stars of Egypt. So that would be one thing that I would be thinking about with the December 3rd birth, notwithstanding the square, by all means. So that is an issue. And then, of course, I'm going back to that decan chart, something else I want to discuss. But um, the December 5th chart, we had the moon in late Pisces in the morning hours.
Mm.
The moon was conjoined the fixed star Shiat, Scheat, which really deals with it's one of the uh, great square Pegasus stars. It deals with the
Oh yeah.
forearm or the forehoof of Pegasus, the winged horse. But it does seem to coincide with this idea of think of being about being trampled upon or challenged. So December 5th, the other option that you considered, has that moon conjoined Shiat, Scheat, and it can be a moon degree, they said in ancient scholarship, of shipwreck or challenge. So
Yeah.
conjoined the Neptune, conjoined the black moon, Lilith, conjoined Chiron, that could be an indice of health issues long term, but also certainly psycho-emotionally. It can talk about some challenge. Now, the other part is that there's a beautiful trine of that moon to that Mars Mercury. The Pisces moons are beautifully trined to that Mars Mercury. So maybe she would wind up working with people who are in jeopardy or in trouble. That could be an expression of that. But that moon with that fixed star Shiat is kind of a questionable one. The day after that, December 6th, has, as you said, that moon in Aries. And I have to say, in general, probably for most people to have a sun in fire and a moon in fire in a beautiful applying trine to each other probably would be a felt quality of power and flow. So obviously you looked at this moon and Aries date a great deal.
Hmm.
So what again had you think? I have the option of the moon in Aries, but I'm going to go with the moon in Pisces. I'm just curious what you thought when you saw the moon in Aries.
Well, moon in Aries, obviously. Well, my wife has moon in Aries. Mom has moon in Aries as well. I know that the Aries, the Sun in Aries, people do have that trine. Life does seem to go flow a little easier for them, at least on an internal scale. Um, like my son has that. That's the main reason I was looking at that because my son has, Aquarius, Gemini, Sun, Moon, Trine, and he's very self-contained. Is very self-supportive. He doesn't really need, you know, vindication or validation from others, which is, nice thing to have in a kid. So this is the one big reason why I would probably have chosen this. I know Aries fire is a little, um, I don't want to say less grounded than air, obviously, but you know, definitely a lot more. She would be a little bit more adventurous, definitely.
She would
So this
probably be
was a
more
big
more
contender.
she'd be more fiery. I would bet you're right. So here is the birth chart on December 3rd with mom, with Natalia. And as you
Mm,
mentioned, uh, had Emmy been born that day before with that moon in Aries at 10 degrees, it would have been a moon Aries with mom's moon Aries Venus. That would be a nice alignment. So here, the birth chart actually, that moon in Pisces, um, uh, still has a powerful connecting factor to that water, the water placements in Natalia's chart. I also noticed that that moon in Pisces squares mom's sun and mom's Uranus. Either way we go, these few days of December 3rd, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th all have that sun conjoined your mom's your spouse's ascendant there at 9 degrees Sag.
yeah,
So the sun of this chart, even with regardless of which day, within those few 4 or 5 days, is going to be on mom's ascendant. That is an important factor in this chart, no doubt. Um, but here's the other thing I want to point out. We're looking at these as this is what happens when you get into this kind of a this. It's a little bit of a quagmire potentially, right? When we start reviewing
yes,
the dates of birth and thinking about, you know, December 3rd, December 2nd, December 5th, December 6th, you know, the moon going from uh, Aquarius to Pisces to Aries, you know, what works best. The other piece we're kind of forgetting is that this, as I love to say, is an event chart. Having a human come out of your body for mom is about as big an event as you're going to have in life. So birthing a human out of your body, that's a significant event. And so when we look at a birth chart, our birth charts too, with our parents, for instance, we look at our birth charts wrapped around our parents, or our parents' birth chart in the center, as we have with Natalia and Emmy, her daughter, in the
Yeah.
outer wheel here. When we do that, we get another perspective of what the meaning of this or what circumstances are. I mean, the birth chart of a child actually describes the circumstances of that child's birth and the situation around that child's birth. And so, if we had an Aries moon, it would imply that perhaps that 2 days after, that mom and daughter would be more emotionally aligned, perhaps. But you know, again, we're discussing what this happenstance is about, and we have Uranus near the moon by transit. So transiting Uranus
Yeah.
in Emmy's chart was near mom's moon. So there is something sudden or quick that might be happening during this birth in general within these few weeks. There was a C-section, so there is a Uranian intervention here of some sort. It wasn't a natural birth, but something different happening, a C-section. And of course, too, I think it's interesting that that transiting Mars within that few days is near that Jupiter. And also, I look at it as not too far from opposing mom's moon Venus. So there again, for me, would be the awareness that, yeah, this is going to be a C-section. Probably as an astrologer, I would have chosen, in fact, the week that Emmy was born, where that Mars is on that Jupiter and off the opposition to that moon for the birth itself. But it still describes the procedure. You know, we do have a Mars Uranus opposition, so it describes the procedure. There's a C-section birth, right? So that's another
Mm.
factor. So when we look also at the person's birth chart, it ostensibly describes, here's where things get to think really, really weird. You know, if we go to Emmy's chart, or anybody else's chart for that matter, the chart itself describes sun daddy, moon mommy, and where they are. So this begs the question, how could Natalia, how could mom be in any real different state of being or consciousness from December 3rd to December 6th with that Aries moon? The Aries moon implies mom's in a very different state of consciousness or being, but one would ask, any scientist would say, how much different can mom be in a few hours of time, 3 or 4 days? That would be really kind of an implication. So maybe here's where we get to the weird part of astrology, where it does describe the soul as well as the event. It's not only where mom and dad are in their own growth and their own development, it is also a little bit about that particular soul. Although one would think, although we don't, I mean, who could prove this, that a soul is already in some way, near that child, that near that fetus. I mean, the soul, they say, is kind of proverbially hovering around that child already. The child's about to be
Yeah.
born, no matter how you slice it, and it could even, I suppose, come, of its own accord without the C-section. It could spontaneously start to arrive. It's ready, man. Nine months are done. So
Yeah.
so then this gets a little metaphysical now, doesn't it? That is the
Yes.
chart. Our charts describing mom and dad and the event of us entering their marital system, entering their personal growth system, having a child enter your life is another major life changer. And so our charts all describe how our birth was a game changer in some way for mom and dad. But now we're looking at the possibility of a C-section and that moon changing signs, potentially implying a soul having a different uh, inspiriting. So there's some, there's then there's, I guess, if the soul's already hovering, there's some kind of interplay between the that soul's essential nature and mom and dad's relationship to each other. So I mean, this is getting very now uh, kind of difficult to really. Now you really got to play. It's like I think you said in the interview today we were prepping. It's a little bit like playing God. It's a little bit like trying to think of the mind of God, so to speak.
Yeah. So that's the one thing that did concern me about this. You're given this choice, and what are the consequences? Because you don't really know. Um, Even though you can have the chart in front of you, you can see what the aspects are. Like you pointed out the fixed stars, which I was unaware of. There might be something else that happens, which might manifest in terms of an Aries moon. It might be you know traffic accident on the way, for example, something like that. You never know
Well, that
how these energies will
well
manifest.
that okay.
So
Well, that's an interesting point. So you're saying the your daughter having the Pisces moon at 4 degrees, and again three Pisces is Fomalhaut, that famous fixed star, the royal star Fomalhaut. So we go from the Pisces moon that she has to perhaps an Aries moon, and you're saying circumstantially there might have been something environmentally happening that would be if she were born 3 days later on December 6th with that Aries moon, that would have been sort of in some way what all shifting the baby's experience, the birthing experience, mom's experience. In other words, you could have had an auto accident, or you could have had conversely something powerfully positive happen politically. So now we're
yeah.
looking at something sort of that we're looking at how the chart describes the physical environment around us, but also the psyche of mom and dad. Now, now, why would that be necessarily important for a person's birth chart? Is it that we have a wiring? I think that science will, in time, will see that there is a sort of a synaptic wiring that quickly is happening and firing once we are out of mom's body and the umbilicus is cut. I think there is a quick, brain synaptic firing where we're organizing ourselves to whatever's around us in the world, circumstantially. So situations and circumstances and politics and mindset, and So you said earlier in our prep where your headset is. You mentioned the double slit experiment. You want to reiterate that for our
Yeah,
listeners?
the double slit expert. So I'm a little fuzzy on all the details, but if you have a beam of light and
So now you're talking about physics here, right? You're talking about
yeah,
science. So you wanted to set this
yeah.
up a little bit. So
So if you don't, I forget exactly how it is. If you don't observe the beam of light when it goes through a particular slit, it acts as a wave. But if you do observe it, it acts as a particle. Um, So
so
just the fact that you are observing and study it does affect what is happening there.
So you're
Um,
describing in essence consciousness.
yes. So even if you are not aware or fully aware of what is happening, your very consciousness is affecting the world around it.
Now that certainly having a human come out of your body, being a father, having your spouse having a human come out of her body, having this baby enter your world, whatever's happening around you psycho-emotionally is having an imprint on you, including this major event, and that baby's absorbing everything. That human creature,
Hmm.
that human mammal is tuning into everything, certainly after its birth. There's a there's a theme of thriving and surviving that happens. We were 9 months in this wonderful womb and safe and warm, and it was a place for us to gestate. And now suddenly, we're ripped from that situation. Where we're not in that situation anymore. So the birth experience, of course, is primal. And so whatever's happening around us, that child, the thriving principle and the surviving principle kicks in. And so that's also what a birth chart describes. But yeah, you just mentioned some really important pieces to this C-section delivery date with astrology. What is my consciousness? What are the circumstances around us? The chart describing the potentials of circumstances, the chart describing potentials of my consciousness, my spouse's consciousness, where we are in our feeling state, and with regard to each other. It also brings up, of course, as you're delivering with a obstetrician, the doctor's ideas, the doctor's concepts about what's safe, unsafe, healthy for the baby, etc. Right? So when you were looking at that, the moon Aquarius or the moon Pisces, which it was for her birth, or the moon Aries, you were probably looking at those three charts also in terms of what the implication might be for the wellness of the baby,
Yeah.
right? I would think that would be
And their
another.
potential in life as well. So,
Well, the potential is the birth chart. This birth chart of December 3rd. That's the
yeah.
potential. That's the free will potential combination, right? But when you're looking at the date of birth itself, one would be contemplating any factors that could be problematical for the child. So, for instance, an Aries moon on December 6th instead of December 3rd, an Aries moon would have been, yes, conjoined mom's Venus and moon, but also opposing mom's Mars. So
Yeah.
the obstetrician gave you a date of December 3rd. And if you said, well, can we push it to 4 days later? What do you say, doctor? Can we push it 4 days later? The doctor might have opinions like, well, maybe, but that might be, that's getting a little concerning for the welfare of the child. It's getting kind of late, perhaps. Astrologically, we'd look at a moon opposing Mars in mom's chart and think, a moon opposing Mars, Saturn, Pluto. I mean, I would have,
Yeah.
as an astrologer, I would have thought an Aries moon opposing that Mars, Saturn, Pluto could be concerning. It would, by the way, for your daughter, have plugged into your spouse's natal position of Moon Venus conjunction opposing Mars, Saturn, Pluto, Jupiter. That is what Natalia had in her birth chart.
Yeah.
The implication is certainly there in Natalia's chart, not only about the emotional, psychic family piece that we talk about with mom, it also talks about the circumstances of Natalia's birth, which probably themselves had some intense issues around it. So to have your own daughter with a moon in Aries opposing Natalia's Mars and Saturn and Pluto perhaps could imply that this may be a little late for this baby, might be a little late for this birth process, might be
Yeah, that
bringing
was
up some
also
risk.
that was going through my head too. Not even astrologically. Yeah, I mean, we were I think at that point already at 9 months. So, you know,
So I'm wondering, did the obstetrician suggest that each day that if you were to wait 3 or 4 days, that did the obstetrician have an opinion about that?
I don't remember, but I believe she did. Obviously, she said you don't want to push it for too long, could, put the baby in danger as well. So, um,
Which is what, with the mom's chart,
yeah,
Mars, Saturn, Pluto, Mars, Saturn, Pluto, and the baby's moon opposing that. One, as an astrology student, could think, that could be concerning. Yes, it was
yeah,
wonderful that it would have been Moon and Aries on mom's Venus, Moon, and Aries that mom herself had. That part looks really joyful. We would presuppose that, I mean, astrologically, it implies that if Emmy had that moon in Aries, that she would be, as you say, Sag, Sun, Moon, Aries, really bubbly. But something that we didn't really look at earlier that I would have thought of too is that moon in Pisces that she has in her birth chart. Pisces is ruled by Jupiter and Neptune both. The sun's ruled by Jupiter. The moon's ruled by Jupiter. Now we're into a different thing, which is
yeah,
if we go the day before, where was it? There it was, December 2nd. That moon would be in Aquarius with that Jupiter in his home base sign of Sag. It's another gig, and probably see the moon implication here in Aquarius would have been an emotionally rigorous person, a person who is emotionally rigorous and emotionally intense and emotionally maybe even judgmental and emotionally black and white and emotionally driven. So a really driven personality, we would think, that Emmy would have had if she were born the day before her birth, because that moon would have been conjoined the ascendant, emotional, but also squaring the Mercury Mars conjunction. So she would have been perhaps quite fiery. I'm going to read this chart of her birth chart that that fieriness is not what we have with Emmy. She's not necessarily aggressively fiery, but I would think if we had her with that Aquarian moon, she would have been. She would have had definitely a fiery quality. Now, again, the issue is what's happening a day, one 24-hour period before Emmy's birth? Why would a 24-hour period, in some way for mom or dad, have shifted mom or dad energetically or psychologically or emotionally to have a baby, come out with a different experience? Because the chart does describe not just the soul's nature, but what that soul is experiencing in this lifetime. So, I think we're bringing up some kind of complex questions. I bet a lot of my viewers and listeners would say that I'm in some way overthinking it. Astrology tells you what's going to be, but I'm not so sure that we should look at it so plainly. For instance, how many astrologers do mundane astrology and looking at charts of when the space shuttle exploded, or look at charts of when the Titanic went down, or look at charts of when ICE agents get into an armed conflict with citizenry. We look at those mundane charts because they describe the psyche and the spirit of that moment. And so that is what our birth charts do. They describe mom and dad's journey for 9 months. We can even look at that that pregnancy chart, that insemination chart, if you will. When 9 months earlier, we've got that soul perhaps being birthed, sperm and ovum, right? So the charts are just supposed to be descriptive of our journey. So I'm just kind of wondering what thoughts were happening for you looking at all these charts as we're kicking it around again today.
Well, it comes down to yes, it does describe, a snapshot of the moment. So it's like the imprint, you're always going to have that. You're always going to have your birth chart, even though it does evolve. Um, you know, that birth chart, even though obviously the progress chart always will change and will go on, and nothing ever stays the same. But at the time, I just felt the weight of, oh my God, this is what her birth chart. She'll never be able to change it. But right now, I can change it. Um, so that's kind of what was going on, in my head at the time. You know, maybe we're coming into consciousness where that might not necessarily be the case, um, in a strange way. But at the time, when I was thinking that, yes, for now, we do have these choices. The consequences of these choices um, might not always be immediately apparent, but um, I want to know what you think about, now that we have these choices, what are um, the ramifications? You're, I think you muted yourself.
Sorry, when I look at stock market astrology, or how those charts describe market movement, or when I look at mundane political charts and how they describe a circumstance that has unfolded, or when we look at electional astrology and we elect uh, when to open a storefront for business, when to initiate a contract or something. The idea is that there is something happening phenomenologically within and without that the chart's mirroring. It's mirroring, a time when there's flow or less flow, right? So so I think what we are exploring really in this case, day by day, for your daughter's birth in this case, circumstances, environmental or familial or social. I think that uh, we're describing psychic states that the parents are having, and maybe marital states that they're having, where they are together. I mean, all those things are what are implied in a chart. Um, I think in a very real time sense, this brings up kind of an interesting premise. that from day by day, our, as you said when we started, this idea of that physics and the particle versus wave, the aiming electrons, a beam of light at a particle slit experiment where the electrons are enjoined in some way. This idea of everything's interweaving, everything's enjoined in some way, and quantum physics. This is something that astrologers are really tagging on to, this idea that everything's interwoven, as above, so below. So we're really talking about where is our consciousness and our headset from even day to day, and how I say with my clients, when we're born, when a child is born, the dog, the cat, and the little kid are absorbing everything that's happening in that family. So, our state of consciousness, our state of conscious awareness, our state of unconsciousness, our state of unconscious lack of awareness, all have some implication for what's happening around us. And since we have, in this case, for your daughter, potentially an Aquarius moon or a Pisces moon or an Aries moon, and those implications are, for astrologers, radically different emotional wirings, goes to show how could something in a few days really be so foundationally different from for the parent. It just goes to show, again, state of consciousness. So yes, there are, as you said astutely, there could have been circumstances during each moon phase, potential for the C-section. There could have been emotional, psychological, physiological, family-oriented circumstances that could shift kind of the soup of what's happening. So let's get back to your daughter's chart here for a second, if I may.
Hmm.
There was one slide that I didn't really get a chance to talk about, and that was decans. That since we can really look at a time of birth differential from one delivery date to another potentially, but also that moon will shift by sign and by degree, we do have each decan 10-degree components of each birth sign. So in the traditional Western decanates of astrology, each 10 degrees are ruled by a different planetary ruler. We could say each 10 degrees of each sign has a different vibe. Is a good way to put that.
Yeah.
So if we considered the tail end of Aquarius in the Venus decan versus the early degrees of Pisces, where Emmy's 4-degree Pisces moon is ruled by the decan of Jupiter, versus the last decan of Emmy's chart, that would have been, as you said, the possibility of December 5th with that 28 Pisces moon and the decan of Mars, or
Hmm.
a 10-degree or earlier, a 10-degree roughly moon in Aries on December 6th. That would have been a Mars decan again. So that martial energy would have been most notable. When she was born during a Jupiter decan, it says that her
Yeah.
nature would be perhaps, especially jovial. That Jupiter Jove quality is a powerful piece of that chart. So the decans are one thing we can look at too in setting this and describing the nature of that child, but also the nature of the child is what's happening around it. So yeah, as we kind of come to close pretty soon, I don't know, some thoughts you may have about all of this.
So, well, one of the things I said before, this is, a new tool that we have. I kind of see that. You just got to know where to wield it correctly. It's like the first person who picked up an axe, said, yes, I can make firewood and I can, make, material for a house, or I can chop my arm off. So, um, in a way, just like that, you got to be careful. So, I have a Virgo moon, so obviously I'm as prudent and as careful as I could possibly be. Um, so, but it is interesting that it's one of the ways that, consciousness can be elevated here, because now we are forced to see, you know, what potentials would be, and even the different birth charts that you look at could theoretically be seen as living, still a living being. I mean, I'm sure somewhere in the world somebody was born on December 6th, Um, and they might have X amount of chart, but I mean, if you think about it, my daughter, in a sense, just because I thought about it, might have certain aspects of that chart as well. So
Well, and as I say, life is a phase. Every birth chart is a snapshot astronomically in motion. Everything's in motion. We are constantly in growing motion. That's the implication of a chart, that we are growing in motion. And here, this idea in this very rubber to the road kind of a thing that we're discussing here. Do I birth my child with an Aquarian moon? Do I birth my child with a Pisces moon, or do I birth my child C-section with an Aries moon? Um, well, when you start getting down to it, it's describing an interrelationship of inner and outer circumstances, kind of like that issue of a particle versus a wave in physics. That the
yeah,
energetic is a really key thing. The awareness, the mindfulness, the mindset is a really key element. But there's no doubt that in standard astrology, we would read those three charts in some ways very differently emotionally. An Aquarian moon, a Pisces moon, an Aries moon. We read them technically very differently for that child. And so
yeah,
it does bring up an issue of what would vary. How would those few days necessarily vary that child? And we all know in astrology that the moon governs, because it changes signs every 2.5 days. The moon symbolically describes a zeitgeist, an outer world, inner world, interactive change of consciousness from every 2.5 day period. Every 2.5 days, something is shifting. We can kind of think of that too, by the way, in terms of the phases of the moon, and how the phases of the moon progress every month, and how they change
yeah,
their apparent illumination even. So nature has me thinking about the houses of a chart. Each house will change also. Every sign rising will change every 2 hours. So there is this theme of duality. Things are about interactive. Um, but anyway, the philosophy, psychology of this, the spiritual psychology is actually what we're getting at in the root of this discussion, or where I've taken it at least. But practically speaking,
yeah,
your daughter's got this Pisces moon and that Sag sun, and they are square to each other, and it implies something about mom and dad, maybe uh, with connection to Emmy, mom and dad uh, making adjustments, to each other, making adjustments in how they
yeah,
parent this child. Perhaps if Emmy had that moon in Aries, it would be a little more flow. Maybe Emmy's nature would be more fiery rather than
yeah,
a fiery an action. Here we have a Sag Sun action fire and a Moon Pisces feeling responsive. I mean, she's
yeah.
clearly, the chart says, very, very sensitive Moon Pisces with Neptune and feeling oriented, right?
Yes. But to your point, that would also, entail the opposition to Pluto, and Saturn, at least I think in the mom's chart. But those are other things to consider as well. So, it might make life easier in one area, but more difficult in another. It's, I guess, two sides of the same coin. So,
So my thought, folks, and kind of as we come to close for today, well, maybe we'll pick this up again and dig into it in other ways as we contemplate this complex theme. Um, kind of a final thought would be that the chart is a mirror of our conscious awareness. The chart is a mirror of our child's interaction with us. The chart is a mirror of our interaction with each other as parents, and how that child is vibing us. And ultimately, every parent knows this one, which is that your child is a major source of learning and growing for you as a person. That every child will challenge you and encourage you to grow as an individual. And that's the other part, that we could look at this issue of which moon does should my daughter have when I have a C-section. can also describe how will this child challenge or support each parent. So that's another thing. Maybe we'll pick up and do a part
Yep.
two to this another time and talk about the lived experience here. I'm kind of curious
Yep.
about that a little bit. So
Definitely.
any closing thoughts or ideas for today?
Well, the only thing that shot into my mind, energy goes where attention, energy flows where attention goes. As always, Alex, thank you again.
Thank you
Um,
too.
being a great teacher,
Thank you so
wonderful
much.
astrologer.
So kind
Um,
of you. So let's bring up then a couple of last slides here to contact us. So for those of you who want to get a hold of Rob for astrology and or tarot sessions, they can go to robertmeisner65 at gmail.com.
that's right. Thank you very much.
Indeed, thank you too. And folks, if you want to get a hold of me for session work, you know where to find me at astrologyspirit.com. And there's my QR code there for people to take your cell phones and kind of quickly take you to my website. Thank you so much, Rob. It was great to connect with you again. And maybe we'll talk about a part two here. We'll have some other thoughts that are maybe more glued together. Today was just kind of a romp around the
Yeah,
mulberry tree with
definitely.
possibilities. Thanks everyone for listening and watching. We'll see you again. Have a great night. Take care.
Thank you,
See you,
Alex.
Rob. Thanks too. See you. Bye bye now.
Bye bye, y'all.